Hi everyone, this is Jill, and as you know, I'm an author, editor, a publisher and your facilitator for the online program on how to write a novel. So this is part of the plotting module, which is to enable you to work out some ways to get from your lovely beginning that you started in the last module and find your way through to the end of the story without having it develop soggy middles, which we know as donuts, and giving it some peaks and troughs, some levels of interest, and also a way to gather your information into sizable chunks that will keep the reader interested and will keep you interested as you're writing. And this is something that will be very familiar to you, and you may be looking at this and thinking, how does an old-fashioned fairy tale that's very simple and very straightforward help me to write my very complex novel? Well, the truth is, this is a technique that I use for all of my books, from the most simple picture book, which it lends itself really nicely to the most complicated adult novel with many narrators that jumps backwards and forwards through time, and that is really quite a complex piece of work. So believe me, it works for everything. It's just a matter of how you apply it. And it is the tale of the Three Little Pigs. So just to remind you what happens in the Three Little Pigs is we have a beginning, and in that beginning there's a fairly static image, if you like, of the three little pigs living together potentially in their parents' house. And so that's what the beginning looks like. It's clear, it's routine. And then something happens to interrupt that routine. And in the case of the Three Little Pigs, it's that they are told or they decide to go off and seek their fortune and live their own lives in their own houses. So the first little pig sets off and he builds his house of straw. Now, we know as readers and as adults and people who understand these things that straw is not going to be enough to withstand even a strong breeze, let alone the onslaught that is about to occur to the first little pig, which is that the wolf arrives and he huffs and he puffs and he blows that house down. So that first little pig didn't use his nous terribly much, so he perhaps didn't think things through terribly carefully, but he gave it a go. And that's really the key to that first house being built. He gave it a go. So then, depending on which version you know, that first little pig runs on and joins his second brother, or the second brother on his own decides to build his house of sticks. Now, sticks are more substantial, they can withstand more pressure, more variations in the weather, and they would have more of a chance of standing up to the enemy, of withstanding whatever it is that somebody else can challenge them with. So he builds his house of sticks, and the wolf comes along, and again he huffs and he puffs, and he blows that house down. So even though the second little pig had perhaps had more chance to think about what would work in these circumstances, and had applied himself perhaps more thoroughly, still it didn't quite work, and the enemy still has the upper hand. So on they go to the third little pig. Now, sensibly, he's either seen what has happened to the other two little pigs, or he's worked it out for himself that he needs something far more substantial than either straw or sticks. And so he builds his house of bricks and mortar, which again we would imagine would be able to undertake some hammering and would definitely be the way to stand up to the wolf. However, even though that would make sense, and he's obviously thought about it, he's applied some different techniques, and he's worked out some ways to face his challenges head on, that third little pig hasn't considered that the wolf may also be working these things out. So the wolf has observed what's going on, and he's understood what the third little pig hasn't, in that there's still an opening, there is still an opportunity for him to gain the upper hand. So the wolf climbs onto the roof and heads down the chimney. Back in the house, however, the three little pigs, who we imagine are joined together by now, unless the wolf has happened to eat them along the way, have also thought about this. They know that this wolf is cunning. He is wily. He's strong physically. So they've understood a whole amount of information about the enemy and about what he can do to them. So recognizing that he could do something a little sly, which is to climb down the chimney, they set up a pot beneath the chimney top. So in the fireplace there's a boiling pot of oil or water or whatever version it is that you know. In any case, whatever it is enough to deter the wolf, possibly even kill the wolf. Again, depending on which version you know. So all in that chimney, we have the climax. We have the story reaching its conclusion with all the various strands and all the pieces of knowledge that the protagonists have gained along the way being brought together for good use, and that is to thwart the enemy. Now, the enemy himself has also been considering some options along the way and has been growing towards this climax himself. So it's in this chimney that the protagonist and the enemy, or whoever it is in your particular story, come together and ensue with their final battle. So there it all happens in the chimney. It all ends, but the story isn't quite finished, because what we need then is a little time for everybody to come back together again. And what you have at the end of the Three Little Pigs is those three little pigs living together in the brick house. So you will see that at that stage, they're all actually in the same circumstances that they were at the very beginning when they were living together in their parents' house. But in the meantime, between that beginning and that end, absolutely everything has changed. Everything about them has changed. They've grown and developed. They've faced a huge number of challenges. So just to recap, you have a beginning, and that is where the ordinary is happening. The beginning is the routine. And then you have a catalyst, which is an interruption to that routine, or some new information that requires your characters to go off and do something different. And then you have a peak of activity. It's a relatively small peak of activity, and in your novel it may cover 3 or 4 chapters. But this will be where your characters are first learning about this new piece of information and are finding out some ways to deal with it. Now, they don't quite get it right. They come back down to baseline, or perhaps not quite all the way to a complete lack of knowledge, but a fair way down again before they go on to that second peak of activity, which is where they try some new things, bigger things, better things that will hopefully help them deal with whatever challenges it is that have been provided for them. Again, back down towards that baseline for a little breather, a little time for the characters to reconsider what's been going on, to work out, well, my house of straw was not good enough and my house of sticks was not good enough. So what am I going to do next that is going to help me to overcome all these challenges? So there is a third peak of activity, which is bigger than the second peak of activity, which is bigger than the first peak of activity. And in that third peak of activity, they're going to be trying bigger and better things again. And this will depend entirely on what kind of novel it is you're writing, but it could be that they are head-to-head in a business battle. It could be that they are discovering who potentially has carried out the murder. So you can see there's all sorts of things can go into that third peak. But it all leads to something bigger still. Now, this is where I often find that people miss out a certain section, and it's true that that third peak of activity can blend somewhat with the chimney event, but the chimney has to be the most dramatic, biggest part of the story. And in that, you will bring together all your various plot strands. So, in the case of the Three Little Pigs, you're bringing together the learning from the house of straw, the learning from the house of sticks, the learning from the house of bricks. And those three characters are coming together, all those strands and what's been happening to the wolf's psyche as well as he's gone through this, join in a big dramatic climax which takes place in that chimney. Now, in your novel, that chimney could be 3, 4, 5, 6 chapters. They may be quite short and snappy chapters, because what that will do is increase the drama and improve the pace. Or it could be that it's one chapter that draws together absolutely everything, from the moment that first piece of information arrived in your catalyst to the finale of what's just happened in that chimney event. And then we have another ending. So you have the climatic event in the chimney, and then you need some time, which is likely to be in your novel a chapter, where the characters come together again, they regroup themselves and consider what has just gone on. And you will notice that that ending is going to look almost exactly like the beginning. But in fact, everything will have changed. So this is something that you see a lot in film, particularly, and you will recognize it from many of your novels, is that the characters will be in exactly the same situation, apparently, as they were in the outset. But everything will have changed about them. They'll have got the guy. They'll have found the murderer. They'll have developed themselves in some way that has created a new life for them that looks remarkably like the old life, but is somehow far more rewarding and satisfying. And so that ending looks like the beginning, but is completely different. And the variety of ways in which you can make it completely different will inform somewhat how literary or commercial your novel is. So if it's a dramatic change, that's likely to be more on the side of the commercial spectrum. If it's a subtle change, or perhaps even a sad ending, then you're more likely to be headed towards the literary end of that spectrum. So that's the Three Little Pigs, and that's how it applies to your novel. It works for everything, believe me, and if you're going into work and you need to present a report, or you need to actually prepare a presentation of some kind, then this will do it as well. Even writing your emails. Believe me, it's a very, very useful technique. And now you know about the Three Little Pigs and just how clever they really are. You'll never ever forget it. So go ahead, do some plotting and plan around it if you want to and you've decided that you're a planner. And you will find it very useful to help you keep the drama and excitement and the plot moving on within your novel. Happy writing.